Hey there. Hope you have the time to listen. Sorry, I just can't help myself. Fate just dropped off her notes on the next profile. So let's see if it's a good one. Oh, a dark mage finding his inner light, that's perfect. I hope you enjoy the story, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Name: Jaden Belldom. Race: human. Sex: male. Age: 16. Height: tall. Shape: Adonis. Magic class: black touched, gifted. Mage, birth. Occupation: Silent Owl Organization Black Division, Team Lead. Affiliation: Silent Owl Organization, Team Captain. Yahoo Club. Family: James Belldom, father. Desiree Belldom, mother. Relationships: Preston Shepherd, boyfriend. Jasper Azura, boyfriend. Rowan Hillshire, confidant. Gail Vindle, best friend lieutenant. Rowan Blackwell, mentor. Background: Jaden was born in Fairsilver to parents who were violently abusive at home and completely devoted members of Silent Owl in public. Their loyalty to the organization came before everything, including their son, so when he began to show potential at a mere 6 years old, they enrolled him in Silent Owl's soldier program. Jaden took to the work with frightening ease. A sharp and focused prodigy who tore through training like grease lightning. By the time he was 10, he was on the field, assigned to a specialist team for missions and for clashes against Night Watch. One of his teammates was a drow operative named Gail Vindle, and the two of them bonded fast over poisons, tactics, and the specific satisfaction of a well-planned kill. Gail became his first real best friend, someone who understood both his sense of humor and the way his mind worked in a fight. Through repeated battles with Night Watch, Jaden met Preston Shepherd. Preston was an equally gifted young paladin, all blinding light and impossible technique, and from their first encounter they locked onto each other as rivals. They were the kind of enemies who would seek each other out on purpose, convinced that no one else on the field could really challenge them. Over dozens of clashes, Jaden learned Preston's rhythms, tells, and temper, and Preston did the same to him. Somewhere inside that constant back and forth, the rivalry shifted into something warmer. Soon they were lingering after missions, stealing time whenever their paths crossed, and eventually sneaking around behind both organizations' backs to see each other in secret. During the same time, Jaden started building a very different kind of connection inside Silent Owl. One of the generals, a vampire named Rowan Hillshire who was only a little older than Jaden but had rocketed up the ranks on intelligence and power, took an interest in him. Rowan saw how fast Jaden learned, how hard he pushed himself, and how much weight he was already carrying. With no safe havens at home, Jaden gradually started confiding in Rowan about his missions, his doubts, and eventually about Preston. Rowan became the person who heard all of it, from the thrill of having an enemy who really saw him to the terror of what would happen if anyone found out. The secret did not last. When Jaden was 12, they were caught by an angel who Preston had angered when he scolded them about treating their disciple poorly. Preston was taken away under the promise that Raphael would take care of everything. Then he was simply gone. No messages came through. No rumors reached Jaden's team. All Jaden knew was that they had been caught. Preston had been dragged off by forces far above their heads. And then there was a 2-year silence where his boyfriend might as well have been dead. Those years were spent on the front lines. Jaden kept running missions, fought Night Watch whenever they crossed paths, and leaned harder on the small bits of stability he had. He worked alongside Gale, joked and schemed about poisons with him. And when the fear got too loud, he went to Rowan and emptied his head out there. Rowan became his confidant for everything he wasn't allowed to say anywhere else. When Jaden was 14, Preston finally resurfaced. The reunion was nothing like what he had imagined. Preston was explosively more powerful than before and carried himself like a stranger. Instead of relief or affection, he met Jaden with cold contempt. He talked to Jaden like he was worthless, treated him as an annoyance at best and an obstacle at worst. From Jaden's side, it looked like Preston had chosen Night Watch and whatever new power they were offering over everything they had shared. It felt like a deliberate abandonment layered on top of the silence. Jaden's response was stubborn and viciously loyal in its own way. If Preston had chosen to become a weapon, then Jaden decided he would be the only one allowed to break that weapon. He kept seeking Preston out on the field, insisting on fighting him even as it became obvious he was outclassed. Preston was too strong now, carrying insane, unstoppable power, and every encounter drove that gap home. For about 6 months, Jaden threw himself at the problem anyway. getting knocked down and still coming back. And Rowan watched this pattern with increasing alarm. It was clear that if something didn't change, Jaden was going to get himself killed chasing the boy he loved. Rowan finally intervened by going higher up the chain. He met with Rowan Blackwell, a dangerous magical creature known as a Neo-Black who survived by eating magic and served as the head of a special unit inside Silent Owl. Rowan Blackwell's division took promising soldiers and turned them into something more, using living black blood slug constructs that could infest a host and buff their body and magic. The trade-off was brutal. Once someone accepted Blackwell's gift, they would never be able to function without devouring magic again. It was strength and survival on one side of the scale, permanent dependency on the other. Rowan laid out Jaden's situation, a young prodigy throwing himself at a Radiance-forged paladin. The project was a well-kept secret Rowan could never discuss with a lower-ranked soldier like Jaden. The sad truth was he could never win, even as driven by a mix of love, fury, and wounded pride as Jaden was. If nothing changed, Rowan was sure Jaden would die on a battlefield Preston would never even remember. Rowan Blackwell listened, considered the problem, and eventually agreed to make an offer. He approached Jaden directly and, instead of treating him like a reckless child, spoke to him like a soldier and an equal. For the first time, someone in Silent Owl asked for the whole story. Jaden told him about Preston, about the disappearance, about the 2 years of silence and the new cruel persona, about the way Nightwatch had taken the only good thing he'd ever claimed for himself. Rowan did not argue with his anger. He simply laid out what the Blackwell division could do. It could give Jaden the power to stand toe-to-toe with Preston, at the cost of binding himself to an addiction to magic for the rest of his life. Jaden accepted anyway. If it could truly give him the power he needed to match Preston, there was no price he wasn't willing to pay. The transformation process was invasive and terrifying, but Jaden didn't have to endure it alone. Gale volunteered to join the Blackwell division alongside him. They both came out the other side faster, stronger, and carrying black-touched cores that could chew on magic instead of being crushed by it. Jaden tested that power on the field, forcing rematches with Preston wherever he could. For the first time since Preston's return, the fights were close. Jaden could survive direct hits, adapt to Preston's light, and answer the things that used to flatten him. It didn't fix what Preston had become, but it meant Jaden was no longer walking into every battle like a death sentence. About 6 months into this new status quo, Jasper Azura, a sin absorption mancer, finally broke ranks. Jasper had been assigned as Preston's handler and anchor during Preston's absence and had stayed by his side for the entire 2-year gap. Watching Jaden and Preston tear each other apart from opposite sides of the war, knowing what had actually been done, became unbearable. After a particularly brutal clash, Jasper slipped away from Nightwatch, tracked Jaden down in the aftermath, and told him the truth. He explained how Raphael's attempt had failed, and how Preston's father had caught wind of their affair once the angry angel had pushed things up the chain. His father's solution had been to volunteer Preston for a secret project. The angel goddess Madeline had long ago given birth to 2 children, one named Radiance who embodied her light and righteous fury, and one named Obsidian who embodied her inner darkness. She had abandoned Obsidian. They had later been adopted by Silent Owl to counteract Radiance's might. Silent Owl had eventually retired the use of Obsidian on the orders of the god of demons Osriel. Madeline had no such ambitions about Radiance. They had kept installing her into host after host. Preston was only her newest victim. This meant the boy Jaden had been fighting for the last year had never been Preston. Not really. Those weren't his thoughts or his words or his actions. All of that had been Radiance. The problem was, even if they somehow dragged Preston off the field, Radiance's hooks ran so deep that they would always pull him back. Nightwatch and the angelic chain of command would keep resetting him, rewriting him, and throwing him at the front again until there was nothing left. The choice in front of Jaden was awful and simple. Either find a way to cut Preston loose from Radiance completely, or accept that the kindest thing he could do was kill him. From that point on, Jaden and Jasper were aligned. They spent roughly a year hunting for loopholes, tracking down anyone who might know something useful, and testing every angle they could find to pry Preston and Radiance apart. Jaden threw himself into the work with the same focus he had once brought to training, using his new black-touched body to survive encounters that would have killed him before. Jasper leveraged his position inside Nightwatch to sneak them information, access, and the occasional stolen moment where Jaden could see Preston without him noticing. Nothing they tried was enough. Radiance's hold ran deeper than either of them had understood, anchored not just in Preston's body but in his mind and soul as well. The break finally came when a skinmancer named Evan Cook cut his own deal with the angelic chain of command. Evan approached Madeline, the goddess who mothered Radiance, and offered her something she wanted: access to his dimensional travel abilities and his allegiance going forward to help run it. In return, he bargained for Preston's freedom. Madeline agreed. Radiance's hold on Preston was severed, not by force on a battlefield but by paperwork and divine negotiation in a place Jaden could never have reached. Preston was released from the project and immediately stepped down from Night Watch, walking away from the role that had been eating him alive. Jasper was reassigned to Eclipse House Orphanage so he could stay close to his friends still in Night Watch without being in danger of being assigned to something he didn't believe in. Jaden, now 16 and fully bound to the Blackwell division by strings of both loyalty and gratitude, finally had Preston back in front of him without Radiance between them. Nowadays, Jaden lives in a rough sort of peace that he never expected to reach. He shares a house with both Preston and Jasper as lovers, a crooked little sitcom of three former weapons trying to act like people. Preston now works as a jeweler at Bits and Bobbles, repairing delicate things with hands that used to break armor with his paladin mentor. Jaden takes a fierce, quiet pride in watching him build a life that has nothing to do with Radiance. Jasper splits his time between Eclipse House Orphanage and their home, arguing with angels by day and coming back to a kitchen table where no one is a project anymore. Jaden still carries black blood in his bones, but now the fight in front of him is not with Night Watch directly but with the creatures of the wastes. He is learning how to be both a boyfriend and a soldier, how to channel all that obsessive focus into protecting their future by fighting a different kind of war. Jaden is determined to keep what he almost died trying to save, and every battle he faces in the wastes is worth it knowing he finally has a real family to come home to. Personality: Jaden is the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately clocks the temperature, then decides whether to turn up the charm or the knives. On the surface he is quick-witted and easy to talk to, a darkly funny boy who can make almost anyone laugh, steer a conversation, or play the polite soldier in front of authority. Underneath that social ease he is built out of hard lines and hard loyalties. Once he decides someone is his, he will bend rules, orders, and his own body to keep them breathing. And he is not shy about doing ugly work in the dark to make that happen. His sense of humor runs black and sharp, the kind of sinister that makes other operatives snort and civilians a little nervous. And he is perfectly willing to make himself the punchline if it keeps attention off the people he is protecting. What makes Jaden dangerous is how tightly all of that is focused. He does not spread himself wide. He picks a handful of people or goals and pours everything into them until there is nothing left. That obsessive focus can look like stubbornness from the outside, a refusal to let go even when logic says the fight is already lost. He will keep coming back, adjusting tactics, and taking hits that would flatten someone else, because quitting feels worse to him than bleeding. At the same time, that focus lets him be surprisingly gentle in small ways. Around Preston and Jasper he can be almost soft-spoken, paying attention to tiny details, remembering preferences, and using his social charm to smooth over tension before it sparks. He is still a weapon and still knows it, but nowadays he is trying to aim that edge outward, toward the monsters at the edge of their world, instead of inward at himself or the people he loves. Appearance: Jaden is a 16-year-old boy with the kind of tall Adonis build that makes people assume he was born for the battlefield. He carries himself like a soldier even when he is out of armor, shoulders squared and movements economical. But there is a restless energy under the surface that never quite shuts off. His hair is an imperial red that he usually keeps practical but a little wild at the edges, just long enough to fall into his face when he is tired or thinking too hard. His eyes are a sharp Caribbean green that miss very little, bright and almost unnervingly focused when he locks onto someone. And when he calls on the black blood coiled in his body, they burn into a deep violet that makes the change impossible to ignore. His clothing leans slightly gothic when he has any say in it, favoring dark palettes, fitted layers, and details that read a little dramatic against his pale skin and bright eyes. Even in uniform he finds ways to smuggle that aesthetic in. A darker shirt under standard gear, a touch of black metal on jewelry or buckles, gloves that look just a bit too sleek. The contrast between his almost pretty, statue-carved build and the understated, Shadow-leaning style makes him look like he stepped out of a stained glass window from the wrong cathedral. Up close, the impression he gives is of someone who is both deliberately composed and permanently 2 seconds from action. A quiet, handsome blade waiting for a reason to move. Abilities. Dark Mage. Jaden's Dark Mage abilities come from long years of training as a combat-focused caster, starting from his early Silent Owl education and pushed harder by the demands of war. His magic is built around heavy hitting, control-oriented dark magic that is meant to end fights fast or lock the field down so his side can move. In practice, he uses this to pin enemies in place, strip away their safe options, and hammer at weak points while someone like Gale moves in for the finishing blows. Black Blood Infusion. Jaden's decision to accept Rowan Blackwell's gift was born from a desperation to reach his love. Jaden accepted Rowan Blackwell's offer and let living black blood slug constructs infest his body as part of the Blackwell division process, turning him into something that can devour and recycle magic instead of being shattered by it, giving him brutal durability, enhanced magic, and physical traits and the ability to adapt to hostile energies on the fly. In a fight, he leans on this when he needs to take hits that should kill him, wade through high-level magic, or push his other abilities past their safe limits by feeding them on what he absorbs. Toxic Art. His talent for poisons grew out of his friendship and field work with Gale, who first taught him to respect poisons and chemical warfare as a precise art instead of a crude trick. The specialty centers on crafted toxins, tailored delivery methods, and a deep understanding of how to break a target down over time or in one sharp moment. Jaden uses this to lace weapons and traps, tilt the turns of a battle before the enemy ever reaches him, and quietly dismantle threats that his more obvious magic cannot safely touch. Well, that's all for our boy Jaden. He's a real showstopper on the battlefield, but also a heartthrob for the ages. Guess this is where we split for now. Come back soon for another story from the epic peeps of our world.